Welcome to the LG Wheelhouse. I am your host, SirMikeKnight. With me, as always, is Hutch and Colonel. Joining me today is the AGM of the Adirondack Flames, STL Bleeker. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And not a problem. When we get people on this show, we like to get their background in league gaming. So the floor is yours.
Alrighty, I'll keep it kind of short. I started out first season, CHL, with the Tri-City Americans Season 4. Next season, Colonel picked me up, and I got to play for Syracuse for half the season. Then I got traded to Colorado, finish off their playoffs. Last season, I played with Syracuse again on a line with Ambient, who we all know and have heard of. And this season, I took an AGM role with Adirondack, so we've been kind of cruising along this season.
And for those who aren't following the standings, how's Adirondack doing?
Not as good as we would like to. We've been having some trouble on the back end with our goalie situation, but over the last couple weeks, we've picked up a few goalies, and we've actually went from worst team in the league, and we're up to the third, tied for fourth to last. So we're getting there. We're making a strong push for the playoffs.
And on up. All right, let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about the Grand Rapids management suspension. Hutch?
Yeah, so I guess over the weekend, this came down that the Grand Rapids management has each received a 1-week suspension. So that's, for those of you who do not know, that's Ono B and Ono Math, which are two of the top players on Grand Rapids. So from what I'm gathering, there was some personal information disclosed to a member outside of the management group. And then that member took this information that they had received. We're not entirely sure if they got into management tools or if one of the management members sent pictures or some type of information to this other member. But this member then proceeded to try to broker trades with other teams around the league and discuss the status of other players. So as you guys all know, you can't do that. You know, you have two management members and that's how your team rolls. You can't be giving information out to other guys. So it kind of blows my mind that they thought they could get around that and kind of bring another guy into the group. And the most surprising thing of all is that this other guy then went out to other teams and tried to make trades. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. So it kind of makes me wonder what exactly they were thinking in giving this other member, you know, the ability to kind of go out and broker trades for them.
I wonder if this is the same person that gave everybody $10 to freaking change their name to Oh No. Colonel, you got anything?
I mean, it's always a good idea to kind of keep a lid on what you're doing as a manager. I had, a few well-trusted members of my team when I was running Syracuse in season 19 that I would, entrust some little tidbits of information or just get their opinions on stuff. But when it came to stuff like that, me and my AGM Mindhunter were the roots for communication between all other teams and stuff, right? You can't just get your team to do stuff for you. It's almost a little bit lazy in my opinion, like you sign up to do the management job. I don't know how, if it was an accident, I don't understand how they didn't catch on to what was going on, but I guess they'll serve their time on their suspension and learn from it if they did know if they disclosed information that they weren't supposed to,
It's kind of crazy. Bleeker, you got anything?
I mean, honestly, who can really tell the difference between any of the Onos? So maybe they thought they'd get away with it just by hiding in by being an Ono.
Yeah, and before we move on, I'd just like to mention something, and I've heard chatter of this kind of idea in the past as well. But you know how the NHL operates with an owner, a GM, and an AGM? A lot of people have been saying over the past couple seasons, why don't the AHL have a similar situation? Maybe we implement a captain to kind of assist the AGM and GM. And, once the bidding is complete, you give one person on your roster this, management position. Their cap still counts towards your cap. But, it just gives an extra hand in there helping out, in terms of making trades and stuff. I think it could be a good idea moving forward to kind of implement something like this. So there's not just two guys running the show, but yet another guy in there helping them. I'm not sure what you guys think of that option, but, it's something that I thought of, as a AGM last season, and I'm sure, a lot of management groups around the league would probably be all for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, but the problem is you got too many hands in the pot. I mean, it's not a bad idea, but this is just silly. Like, this is just stupid. Like, seriously. And I mean, nothing against the team, the Oh-No's, but you can't. I'm just baffled, dude. I can't even. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't even get my thoughts straight to start talking about this crap. Like, this is just management 101. Like, really, this is like just out there.
And the thing that really caught me off guard is this is actually their second violation of this. So they've done it before and have been given a warning, and now they're out there doing it again. So I don't know. When do you learn? Like, these guys seem to be all over the action center with complaints filed against them. So management positions come open next season, whether you do well or not. Does an NHL owner want this headache on their plate?
Probably not. All right, moving on. Brickeasy. We're going to talk about him again. He gets waived by Utica. Hutch?
Well, this is another, I guess, edition of our little Brickeasy side session we have going here. It's kind of odd, I didn't expect to see him back in the league. I thought that, and maybe I misinterpreted the whole ruling, but it was to my knowledge that any suspension over the summer season was carried over no matter what. But it seems as though he managed to find himself back into the league, and now he's on waivers from Utica because obviously they don't want him in their dressing room disturbing things. And the unfortunate thing about it is one team is probably going to claim him, and he's probably going to play well for them. And personally, I don't know if that's entirely fair or not, but I mean, I guess every team out there has a chance to go out and get him, but at the same time, he was banned for 2 seasons, and he finds himself back in the league again. So I don't really know what to think of it. It was to my knowledge that these 2 season bans were going to be carried over.
Bleeker, would you pick him up?
I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of run through my head, but I've never really had any run-ins with Brex since I've only been in the league for about 3 seasons. With all the hearsay about him and everything I've heard, I'd probably steer clear. We've had a few locker room guys we've had to trade that were causing issues, so I don't think I'd want another one.
All right, Colonel.
It seems like Breck attracts a lot of attention wherever he goes. That $9 million contract he got back in the CHL, I think it was season 4. I'm pretty sure that was like a troll deal. Like, Red Deer was just trying to screw with him a little bit, and they bid him right up to $9 million right away. Had no intentions of using him. So it's kind of because the guy has been known as a whiner till he gets on a team he wants. So I'm pretty sure at the time he was trying to get on Kamloops, and they were a powerhouse team in the CHL. And I mean, he just kept bouncing around from team to team, refusing to play until he got where he wanted to go. I mean, no one really likes a guy who won't play for a team he's traded to or wherever he ends up. I mean, this league is designed to be a simulation league. We just, want players to play wherever they are. I understand sometimes you get in certain spots where it's like tough to deal with your manager and stuff, and you could be on a team that's really bad or you don't like it. And I mean, there's situational stuff, but it seems like wherever Berkeyze goes, he just keeps trying to get where he wants to go, like it's there's no end to it. So I mean, I would avoid him just for that reason, but he does provide value as a player. I mean, if a GM had no choice, I mean, you could take a chance on him. He might score some goals for you. Who knows?
All right. Well, I mean, it sounds like it'd be a pretty good deal for a bubble team if he'll play for that bubble team. But that's the risk you take, right?
Definitely. You don't really know if he's going to show up or not. I mean, who knows? He might have already told Utica he didn't want to play for him, right? So, I mean, what are you supposed to do? You got no other choice but to waive him. We're getting down. I mean, you can't really do any trades and stuff when it's the last couple days toward the trade deadline. So, I mean, Utica might have been put in a tough spot right there,
Right. All right. So, the downfall of the Hamilton Bulldogs. Colonel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to see what's happened in Hamilton. I had kind of high hopes from when Funsley took over the team. It kind of looked like they were on, a turnaround. But right now, they're just kind of shitting the bed, so to speak. I don't even know what they're going to do if they can turn it around. I mean, they're only 4 points out of a playoff spot in the West, and the West is kind of weak. I mean, they can definitely still make it, but are the little minor moves they made toward the trade deadline, is that really going to help them? It almost seemed like they were more of sellers than buyers, so I really don't know. I don't have much faith left in them anymore like I did a couple weeks ago.
All right. Bleeker, I know you had something to say about this, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely I've played against the Bulldogs a few times. I'm actually playing against them in tonight's games. They were a solid team to start the season, and then basically, as we all heard, the rumblings, GM issues. People weren't having too much luck with Funsley, but it looks like he just put himself on IR for the next 2 weeks, and they have someone else who's kind of filling in. So who knows? That might end up causing that spark to get them back on the board, and hopefully not for my sake, so my team can get in the playoff contention. But I think they could definitely be a team to go against for the rest of the season.
Hutch?
Yeah, well, I've got a bit of inside information. I've been kind of gathering some thoughts from people around the league. I talked to a couple of people in management positions and, some people who have some, knowing in terms of the situation. So from what I've heard, Fonsley has told his team that he's going on vacation and won't be around for the final 2 weeks of the season. And, that's fine. It's summer and, people want to go on vacation and stuff. But the thing that really bothers me about that is, if you're going to step up and take a GM position, you have to know in advance that you're going on this 2 week vacation. Like, that kind of stuff just doesn't like sprout out of nowhere. And, being trade deadline weekend, he's gone on vacation. A couple of management people have told me, listen, we've messaged Hamilton, we're not getting any response from them. They were very dormant at the trade deadline. As far as I know, they didn't make any deals. And for a team that's quickly falling out of playoff contention and, falling right to the bottom of the standings, that's not good enough. You need to respond to other GMs who are messaging you, even if you don't want to do the deal. Have some common courtesy and respond to these other GMs and say, listen, we're not interested in dealing this player. You don't have to ignore everyone because that just gives yourself a bad name. And like I'll say again, management positions next season, there's going to be a lot more people coming back in the NHL 16. So, if you're not responding to GMs around the league, who's going to want this person managing their AHL team if they're just kind of sitting around and dicking around and not doing anything?
Right. Well, speaking of the trade deadline was today. We obviously recorded on the 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern. And this is the section we talk about trades. So any trades that stand out to you there, Bleeker?
No, man. It was a pretty soft end to the trade deadline, I think. There was a whole lot of trades. I mean, tons if you look throughout the day. I know my team made a few trades. We ended up trading a lot of guys off, but we got some good things in return, including some guys off of Hartford that we were really high on. I know that there was a few big trades like Hicksey that we're going to be getting into here soon, but I'll let you guys cover those a little more since you guys know them a little better.
All right. Hutch?
One that really interested me, and it might not be one of the biggest deals, but it could be, kind of a buy low kind of situation, is when Texas traded Like and Butsy to the Marlies for Ninja. Ninja played with us last season in Syracuse and was an excellent puck-moving defender who also showed great responsibility on the defensive end. I've played with him a couple times outside of league, and I know that he's a really great defender. The only question with Ninja is his availability. His availability last season in Syracuse was, kind of questionable at best. But if this guy can get in 3 games a week, or, have, even 5 out of 9 availability, I think that Texas really wins this trade. And I think that this trade instantly gives Texas another high-end defender who can come in and play in the top 4, or they may even shift some things around, and he may play in their top pairing. They did give up Like and Butsy, but at the same time, I think Ninja could be a high-end player. And if they can get him in there and playing in their lineup on a regular basis, I think that, it's a really big boost to Texas. And of course, Texas has been making a big push and they're, currently sitting 6th in the West. But, there's a lot of room to move in the West. And, getting guys like Ninja in there, if he can play, is really going to help them move up in the standings.
All right. Colonel?
Well, I was gonna talk about Norfolk Admirals picked up Hicksey 999, and I don't know how much Hicksey's been playing in the AHL right now, or if he's in. I'm pretty sure he's in the CHL, and he's on a good team down there. But they did a really good move in picking him up because he's a really good center. And it never hurts to have extra depth on your TC. And I mean, if he's not willing to play AHL or if he can't for some reason, at the very least, they can IR call him up or ECU him during the playoffs. It might be a difference maker if they can't get one of their roster centers to play. It seems like they didn't give up a lot when it comes back for trade value. I mean, they traded Rival Acid, Hoggett Wrecked, and Basque 15. So I actually only really know Rival myself because he's a friend of mine. He was on Syracuse earlier in the season. But in terms of value, I'm not sure that either one of those three players can add up to what Hicksey can bring if he actually plays for Norfolk. So I think Norfolk definitely got the better of the Phantoms on that one. But I mean, it's a 3-for-1 deal, so maybe the Phantoms just needed players who are going to show up for their games. Perhaps they were just trying to, liquidate their assets, so to speak.
Yeah, and I kind of like to comment on that one too, because briefly before that trade was made, the Grand Rapids Griffins made a trade with Lehigh Valley Phantoms, and that involved two-tone Big Max 89, Kucherov, and Bree Drinks going to Grand Rapids for Devil Boyle, Hicksey, Hillbilly QC, and Gaulik a Boss. So, Hicksey bounced from Grand Rapids right up to Norfolk, which I guess it was kind of a three-way trade. And I think that Grand Rapids, I can see, they picked up Two-Tone, and we all know Two-Tone is a great player. He was, high in the league scoring last season. And I think with the suspensions to Ono B and Ono Mav this week, getting someone like Two-Tone in there, is really going to help them compensate for losing their two top guns. And, adding in Kucherov and Bree Drinks and these guys on top of it all, I think will really help them kind of stay in the race while missing their two top players for a week.
Well, does anybody want to talk about the continuation of the Chi-Town pass around?
Yeah,
Hutch?
sure, I can talk about that one. I think that the trade between Manchester and Syracuse is kind of a win-win for both teams. Manchester is, making that playoff push. I think as of right now, they're sitting 10th in the East, although they're only 1 point out. We have Guyman, Tons of Fun, and B.S. Ditka going to Manchester, and Manchester trades Chi-Town Beattown to Syracuse. So Syracuse benefits because they get another high-end defenseman to kind of accompany Deligan and Cynical. There's been rumors that there's a bit of availability issues there. I'm not too sure what those issues are. I haven't really talked to anybody about it. But if they can get Chi-Town into the lineup and, his availability improves at all, it's going to be great for them. And on the flip side, Manchester acquires two solid defensemen in Guyman and Tons of Fun. So they're really going to bolster their back end. They may have traded one guy, but they're getting two good defensemen in return as well. So I think that moving towards the playoffs, and, they're only 1 point out, so, really boosting their defensive core, it's going to help them probably leapfrog some of these teams like Hershey, currently sitting in 8th place, only 1 point ahead of them. And, they get into the playoffs, they have a deeper defensive core now. They'll be able to take on one of these top teams if they finish in 8th, 7th, or 6th.
All right. So let's talk about the winners and losers of the trade deadline. Hutch?
I think that I'll go back to the trade I was talking about. I think a winner of the trade deadline, and not necessarily because the other team was a loser, but I think a winner was the Manchester Monarchs. And as I said before, they're close to the playoffs, only 1 point back. They acquired two really good defensemen that can fit right into their lineup, and I think it was great on Vergi once again to address some needs of his team. And, they started off bad in the beginning of the season, but I think Vergi has been working very hard to shore up his lineup, and I think that, they're on a roll, and I think they could make a good playoff run. As for losers, I think that the loser at the trade deadline is the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. I think that they made a couple of questionable trades. They moved Two-Tone. They moved Hicksey. I'm not entirely sure on the other people that they got in return, but I'm not too sure that they had that great of a deadline. I think that, moving Two-Tone, who's a great player, is going to hurt them. And then they also flipped Hicksey to Norfolk, and they didn't get a big return on that either. So, I kind of wonder what they were thinking there, but in terms of winners and losers, it's definitely Manchester and Lehigh Valley.
All right. Bleeker?
Well, I'm going to go a little homer because we made some trades in Adirondack that not a lot of people really noticed. I mean, we flipped one guy for two guys off of Hartford's second line, and as you guys know, they're in a solid division, and they were still up in the playoff race. And we also got a guy that's kind of unknown from Chicago, Darth Knight off their TC. He was picked number 9 overall in the CHL draft. He had a little bit of a tough spot down on his team that he was on, but the guy's definitely going to be a player to watch for me too. So keep an eye on Adirondack going into the last couple weeks of the season. Losers, I would probably have to agree with Hutch. Lehigh, they gave up quite a lot to get some guys that aren't really known. So it could pay off for them if they really did their research. But if they were just trading guys to make trades, it could definitely have been a big hit and possibly even ruin the season for them.
All right, Colonel?
One team that I liked their moves was Texas, because they actually picked up a good player in Ninja, and like Hutch was saying earlier, if his availability is good or not is a question, but the talent level is definitely there. And also, I noticed that they picked up a really good, solid goaltender in Grazer. He's been around for a few seasons. I remember playing against him lots when he was in Hartford in season 19. I'm pretty sure it was Hartford. And he's a solid goaltender. So Voracek did a good job shoring up his talent level on his team for sure. He picked up a good goalie. So that's it for the winner. And as for loser, like I got to agree with the boys here and say Lehigh seems like they pretty much sold the farm on their team here, and they're taking a big gamble. A lot of the moves, you're not 100% sure what they were thinking on it, but who knows? It might pay off. In my opinion, I don't think they improved their team though, so I'll have to give the loser to them.
All right, I'm going to go a little different route. I'm going to go with Syracuse Crunch as a winner. They went ahead and picked up Chi-Town Beatdown, which can do nothing but bolster a defense that has already been dominating the East. I mean, they've been sitting in the top spot for how long now?
I think the whole season, yeah.
Exactly. So it can do nothing but help their team, especially going into the playoffs. I mean, they pretty much secured their spot in the playoffs. They would have to drop the rest of their freaking games to get out. But to have a defender like Chi-Town bolstering that back defense can do nothing but good. And I'm going to go another different route as far as losers. Wilkes-Barre Scranton. They're a bubble team. They made no trades at the deadline. None. I think they traded, Saba for DeKaiser, but Saba was an NHL guy. So Wilkes-Barre Scranton sitting on the bubble, did nothing. I don't know. I know I'm not supposed to talk shit about my own team, but we did nothing. So hopefully we can get back into the winning ways. If we can't, then, you can blame me as management for not making a trade.
So I'm just going to ask you a question on that. Being a past manager myself, was the shortage of deals, something that you guys came together and said, listen, we got this team and we like it? Or did you guys just have trouble kind of generating dialogue with other teams?
The thing is, man, we had a couple players that we wanted to go after. We were looking to bolster our offense. We're pretty happy with the way our defense is right now and our goaltending. Obviously, we can't trade away Golden Aces, otherwise I would. But, haha, joke, funny, no, okay. So really what we were looking for was some solid wingers. We've got 4 solid centers on our team, but we can only run 3 lines. You can't run 4 lines at centers, right? So we've got 1 center playing winger. While they might not be doing bad at winger, we wanted to try to see if we can get an actual winger. And the problem was that the teams we were dealing with, because we had some players that we were looking at, and the teams that we're dealing with, one of us gave the I got to figure out what my NHL team is doing, and I respond with, okay, man, but the trade deadline's tonight. You got to let me know, and I got nothing.
Yeah.
All right. A couple other teams were just lowballing the crap out of us. They'd be like, oh, I want this really good guy and this really good guy for this semi-decent dude. I was like, no, you're insulting me now. And then that makes me not want to continue talking trades, because you want these 2 really good goal scorers for a semi-decent dude who has a 4 out of 9 availability. Like, really?
Yeah, and from what I've been able to gather from a couple of people in management that I'm in contact with is, the asking price for a lot of players was ridiculously high. I mean, one guy I was talking to in particular was looking to boost his training camp a little bit. He proposed a trade to the other GM, and the GM came back and said, "Yeah, we want your starting goalie for this TC guy." So I mean, some of the GMs I think have ridiculous expectations out of their guys, and some of this expectation may come with merit. But if you believe that this TC guy can acquire you a top starting goalie, why is he on your TC?
I'd agree.
I mean, that's true. That is true, but sometimes it comes down to cap issues as well. So I mean, it all depends on the body of work. But I digress. All right, let's move on to power rankings. Hutch, let's get your power rankings.
All right, so this week we'll start with the East once again. So number 1, we have an on-ranked team from last week, the Albany Devils. So Albany went 9-0-0 last week, and they really jumped. They began last week outside of the playoff picture, and now they're currently tied for 5th with Binghamton. They have 48 points, which is only 2 points behind the conference leading Syracuse Crunch and Norfolk Admirals. So they're currently led by, B-Man has really stepped up for them, Infinity, and I was really impressed by the turnaround of their goaltender, Jabroni. And, he kind of struggled a bit in the early going, but he seems to really turn it around and give their team a really solid back end. So number 2 we have moving up from 3rd last week is the Norfolk Admirals, who have 5-3-1. They're second in the East with 50 points, and as I mentioned before, they're tied with Syracuse. And they're once again being led by Sebi, Wonger, and this week joining them is LA905. Number 3 we have dropping down from number 2 last week, the Syracuse Crunch. Syracuse is still top in the East with 50 points. However, they had a kind of rough week. They went 4-5-0, and they received strong performances from their line of Ambient, Gumba, and Prowsey, and of course on the back end, Cynical. Number 4 we have dropping down from number 1, the Springfield Falcons. 4-3-1 last week, currently 4th in the East with 49 points, but they're only one behind Syracuse and Norfolk. And they're being led by M2S Walsh, Wadden, and Winston Payne. However, one thing I would like to comment on is their top player, Bullet 92, was recently called up to Columbus, so it could be a big change next week, but we'll just have to see about that. Number 5, we have an on-ranked team, the Manchester Monarchs. They were 6-3-0 last week. They're currently sitting 10th in the East with 42 points, and as I mentioned before, they're one behind the 8th place Hershey. They've had strong performances from Pence Crosby, of course their AGM Breaky, and Gretzler.
Well, we did talk about the Manchester Monarchs as being a team to watch last week's show, and they went ahead and went 6-3. And I mean, we have to talk a little bit more about Albany going 9-0. I mean, that's an incredible week. I don't care who you are. 9-0, that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's very impressive because, one of those teams in the East or Northeast going 9-0 in 1 week, that's pretty impressive because, I mean, you're also playing people like Norfolk and, the other teams in the East. So, I mean, any team in the East going 9-0, that's definitely noteworthy.
Right. No, I mean, absolutely, especially with a tight race in the East. I mean, going 9-0 can put you over the top on some of these tough teams. Anybody else have anything to say about that?
I mean, you guys pretty much got it covered. There's nothing else to say.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to the West. Hutch, let's get the West rankings.
All right, so in the West, we have number 1 once again, and this is the Oklahoma City Barons. I don't think, once again, there's any disputing this. They've been the powerhouse of the West and pretty well the powerhouse of the league. They're sitting in first place with 60 points. They went 8-1-0 last week, and they're being led by Laffy Taffy, and of course, once again, their goaltending, Broder and Leprechaun. Number 2, moving up from number 3 last week, is the Rochester Americans. They were 6-1-2 last week, currently sitting second in the West with 49 points, and once again being led by Hertz, Army of One, and their AGM Ennis. Number 3, who was on rank last week, the Texas Stars. They were 7-1-0 last week, 6th in the West with 40 points, and being led by recent acquisition Park the Car, their GM Voracek, and their AGM John. Number 4, dropping down from number 2, is the Grand Rapids Griffins. 6-2-1 last week, currently sitting 3rd in the West with 49 points. And their top players, of course, are Ono Mav, Ono B, who are both suspended for next week, and Ono Ruthless. And number 5, dropping down from number 4 last week, is the Utica Comets. 5-3-0 last week, currently sitting 4th in the West with 43 points. And I think that they've been led really well by Zolomon and Nubsy.
Anybody else have anything to say about anybody in the West? You gotta say
Well,
something,
being
because
from the
we didn't
West, I
say
guess I
anything
should
about
say
that.
something. Since I'm in the West,
Okay.
I'll chime in there. A team that I would actually keep an eye on, the Marlies. They had a rough week last week, and they've kind of been dropping so far as the season goes on. But they've been, every time we've played them, they played us hard. And I would definitely keep an eye on them because they're right on that bubble spot at number 8 with 36 points. But if they have a good week, I could definitely see them jumping up into the 4th or 5th position, down all the way from 8th.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to players to watch. Bleeker, let's start with you.
All right, so
don't start with me.
no, I thought about it. So. Let's start off with Ric Flair. He was a guy that Hutch talked about last week in the Wheelhouse. He's actually a guy that we had on our team up until right before the season started. We traded him to Binghamton. We traded for him, actually, and we acquired him because we thought he was going to be solid. But as we all saw this week, he took the leap. He is now number 1 in the scoring race. I believe he actually is up there with 52 points right now. He's won all but 2 of his games this season, which is incredible because he's actually been playing some pretty good teams. He beat Norfolk 5-1 last week, and we all know they're up and tied for the top. He actually beat Wilkes-Barre as well and Hershey last week. He ended up with 14 points, 7 goals, 7 assists. I think he's kind of trying to prove himself this season and show that he can be a first liner.
Let's be fair. I mean, who did beat Wilkes-Barre Scranton last week?
I guess we could go that route. I didn't want to go there. And then I'm actually going to throw in another guy to kind of watch. He is a guy on my team that I don't think he's doing as good as he really should be, but Macro73, he has probably one of the worst records in the league right now, but he is a solid D-man. He's back on right side. He started out the season on left, and he was really feeling out of position. But now that he's back on right D, he's playing a lot more solid. Just don't ask our TC goalie, Darcy Cooper, about his goal scoring ability because he did happen to put one in the net, which kind of killed our game against the Marlies last week. But I think he's another guy to keep an eye on to end off the season. I think he's going to have a good chance of winning out.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to agree with you there on Macros. I mean, back in season 19, I played goalie for Syracuse actually on the training camp, and the couple times that I actually played games, Macros was one of the defenders, and I found that he was really defensive minded. He's a great defenseman, and I believe last year he was even an all-star. And, I think he's having a bit of a rough season, and I don't think that should necessarily reflect on him as a person and his skill level. I think that he's definitely a solid defender, and I think he's just been, the product of, unfortunate circumstances there.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest on this one. I mean, Adirondack hasn't exactly had a great season, but no, he's been playing top lines for us all season, and it's really been kind of nice knowing that we have a really solid defensive-minded D-man back there.
All right. So, Hutch, you got anything else to add there?
Yeah, one guy who I think that everyone should pay attention to, and I mentioned him last week in the Wheelhouse as a part of one of the guys who was carrying Utica, and that's Zolomon. Currently second in league scoring. He has 50 points, 31 of those being goals and 19 assists. He's plus 11. Last week he only played 2 games, but he won both of them. He's currently 8-3-0, but this guy is dangerous. I think that he's a game changer. And, Utica is really making a push in the West. They're currently sitting 4th. They have 43 points, and I think that they have a lot of movement they can make there. I think that people need to pay attention to Zolomon. I think that, he can turn things around in an instant. And, you just can't let your guard down when you're playing against a guy like Zolomon.
All right, Colonel?
One player in particular I wanted everyone to watch is Watergun13. He's a defenseman for the Binghamton Senators. Right now, he's leading the league in defense points with 28 points in 12 games. And he's also really up there in hits. He's got 54 hits as well. It's always valuable to have a defenseman who can put up some points. He leads the league in goals, on defense. So, he's got 12 goals on 38 shots. So he shoots at a high clip. He's got 31.6% of his shots going to the back of the net. And to have that scoring element along with the physicality element, which is hitting, is really valuable to have a D-man who can kind of do it all. And I'm sure he's contributing to Binghamton's success so far, and he's going to be a big piece for him next week. So I just want to keep an eye on him to make sure, or just to see if he can keep up this good pace he's been setting.
All right. Well, anybody got anybody on the defense talk about?
Well, not really. I think that Colonel really picked out a good one there, and Watergun was a guy that I mentioned last week as a player to watch. And I think it's a good sign, that he's still performing. And I had a few questions about Watergun because he's been flipped around a little bit. I think he was on 4 different teams so far this season. But it seems like he's really settling in Binghamton, and I think that's great for the Senators. And, in terms of defenders to watch, I think that he's probably one of the best.
All right, I got a couple defenders to watch. Let's talk about Chi-Town Beatdown, going to a new team in Syracuse. I mean, he already had a 21 plus minus rating with the Monarchs and the multitude of other teams that he was playing with before. So going on to a team that like Syracuse that just happens to win games, I don't know how you guys do it, can do nothing but make him better. Probably make him want to play a little bit better as well, because you practice against the same players. You always get better, right? So anyway, another person to watch would have to be Chester Cheeto out of the Worcester Sharks. Now, I played with Chester it was like 3 seasons ago. And right now he's doing pretty decent with our boy Wheelhouse down there in Worcester. So there's 2 defenders. Defense is hard when it comes to stats. I mean, you can't really just list off stats. I mean, yeah, defenders that score now, are they scoring from the blue line, or are they cheating up quite a bit and then getting beat on the back end? You don't really know. It's hard when it comes to stats to talk about defense, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And like with the, there is a lot of footage of what goes on in the LGHL out there, but with the lack of video made available to the community, you don't really know. You can only base your opinions off of what you see on stat sheets and what you know from other people around the league in dialogue with other management, other players. We can only gather information that's available to us. If we were able to see all these games on a regular basis, this could probably improve our assessment of defensemen. But, as of right now, we're only given, the stat sheets and, personal information that we know ourselves. So, like you said, it is hard to kind of judge which defenders are better than other defenders. So, it's a bit different with forwards because generally the forwards with the most points are probably the best forwards in the league. But with defenders, points aren't always what they're made out to be.
A quick shout out to not necessarily a player to watch, but a defenseman turned from goalie. For anybody who has followed league gaming, Snakebacks was a pretty decent NHL goalie for a couple seasons, and he switched to defense this season, playing for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and he is holding his own. He's also played a couple defensive games for the Penguins, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he has won them all. So quick shout out to Snakebacks. Good job switching from goalie to defenseman. That's pretty tough to do, especially playing at the level that he is.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I mean, personally, I know I've played a season as defender. I've played a season center. I've played a season at goalie. These positions aren't easy to master, and being a really good goalie and then just kind of throwing that aside and becoming a really good defenseman, that's pretty admirable. And I have to agree with you there. Shout out to him for the work that he's obviously put into his game to bring it up to the level that he's currently playing at.
All right, so let's go move on to teams to watch. Colonel?
I don't want to sound like a homer here, and I mean, I really like what Syracuse or our team has done at the deadline here, picking up Chi-Town. I really think it bolsters our top 4 defense, and I'm looking forward to getting some games in with Chi-Town. Hopefully, I'll get to play at least one with them this week. So I think that we're going to hopefully get back on the horse here and get some wins and see if we can maintain our top spot. It's going to be interesting. We got a couple new names on the roster, so that'll be my team to watch. Is my own.
All right, Hutch?
All right, well, I'm going to stick with the Eastern Conference and more specifically the Eastern Northeast, and I might get some crap for this, but I don't really care. The Albany Devils. I don't think that we can look past the fact that they went 9-0 last week. A few weeks back when we were sitting here talking about the same kind of stuff, they were outside the playoff picture. And for them to go 9-0 and jump up into 5th place, currently only 2 points out of the conference lead, I think that's very, very impressive. And, like I mentioned before, these contributions from B-Man and Infinity and the turnaround by the Jabroni, like mid-season to just kind of come out of nowhere as such and just jump right back up in the conference. I think that's very impressive, and I think that moving forward, people probably shouldn't take Albany as lightly. They got great management there. Swiss knows what he's doing, and I think that we should all pay attention to Albany.
All right. And Bleeker.
All right, I'm going to go with the Springfield Falcons. It's an extremely well-rounded team. From the net out, they're very solid. Winston's been kind of phenomenal this season. They picked up Dredd as their backup, trading away their backup, but he is 3-1 with them last week. Their D consists of 3 draft picks. They got a high-powered offense. I've had quite a few talks actually with their GM and AGM regarding trades over the last few weeks. I respect how they actually move their pieces. They're very calculated, so I think that's why they've actually still been so productive. Even though they had a rough week last week, they're still only 1 point behind. And then I also, this is kind of a weird tidbit, but I like the way that Winston actually built his TC. Just go over to Springfield's roster and look at their TC and check out their gamer tags. It's probably the most eclectic names that you'll ever see. So that's why I'm picking Springfield, really.
So before we move on there, I'd kind of like to talk about what Bleeker was talking about as such as, Springfield is indeed a team to watch, but I think for a completely different reason. They lost their top gun, Bullet 92, to the NHL. I think that we need to kind of keep an eye on Springfield to see, if they can maintain the pace that they've been at, or if they're going to fall out of things and kind of be taken over by Albany and the other teams in the Eastern Northeast and the Eastern Conference. Losing your top player is never great. So, it's interesting to see if some of the pieces they brought in at the deadline will kind of manage to replace him. But, you don't generally lose one of your top players and just come out of it unscathed. So I think that for a completely different reason, Springfield is a team to watch.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with the Norfolk Admirals. I mean, if you're going to talk about any team taking over the top spot from Syracuse, who's held it all season, it's going to be Norfolk, in my opinion. They're a really good team. I mean, what can you say? I was excited about beating them in that overtime, and then things were things, and they ended up beating us pretty quickly, if I do say. So, I mean, they're a really good team. I mean, bottom line. So that's my team to watch, because if anybody's going to take over Syracuse's top spot, it's going to be Norfolk. Moving on to the game of the week. Hutch, what's the game of the week?
Well, once again, I'm kind of going to go homer on this one. And, it's not because I necessarily think it's the best game of the week. But I think one game that a lot of people are going to pay attention to is Syracuse versus Toronto. And I don't know if everyone's aware or not, but a few weeks back there was a bit of confrontation on the nightly power rankings between, a couple of players on our side and as well people on Toronto's side. And the last time we played Toronto, they actually beat us. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I've heard rumors of different stuff happened, but nonetheless, they beat us. But, I think that they may have, got on their high horse a little too early because, I think this is going to be a tough game for them. And I know that Syracuse is coming swinging fists. So, Amazing and Mercy, you guys, you might want to watch yourselves tonight.
All right. And, Bleeker, you got a game of the week?
I mean, I'm going to be a homer like I pretty much have been this whole time. I'm looking forward. Hutch knows what I'm looking forward to. We've been talking smack the last couple days. I'm looking forward to my game against him on Thursday because I got to beat Syracuse last Thursday, but the little caveat was he wasn't there, so I'm looking forward to it.
Colonel, you got one?
No, I'm pretty much on Hutch's side here with the whole Toronto game. I was in the loss. I think they beat us 4-1 or 4-2, something like that. But the problem with that game was there was a bunch of lag outs. Toronto was the host, and we went into the game twice, and We had our right D lag out within 2 minutes of the first period. We restarted, took our penalty, and literally before our penalty was over, we had our center lag out the second time. So we ended up playing 3 first periods. Really, it was tough to get anything going because we played the majority of the game with a CPU at center and right D. They came out and started talking a little bit of smack, so we're just looking forward to beating them. Hopefully, we can beat them anyway. But
All right. Well,
our top line's going to be pretty, like he said, they're going to be swinging their fists.
So I'm going to go Homer as well, but what else can you really do? I'm going to go with Wilkes-Barre Scranton versus Norfolk. After all the board play, OT, restart, my team talking shit to them, their team talking shit to us. I'm looking forward to what goes on in that game. And I'm sure that if it's recorded, it would be a game to watch. So keep an eye out for Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and Norfolk. And that's all we have for this episode of the LG Wheelhouse. For myself, Hutch, Colonel, and thank you, Bleeker, for joining us. That's all.
It's 5-1. Kończę na ładnego Cunningham shot. Jessica shot. Nice hit. Supposed to go. Nice hit there. Hutch couldn't do anything about it.